So today we are going to continue with our discussion of Russia. Today we're going to break down the three branches of government. Let's talk about how the president is elected. Let's look at the legislature. Let's look at the judicial system. As always, take good notes. If you have questions, please let me know. Okay, so really important term for you to learn in this unit, and that is illiberal democracy. Illiberal democracies are a hybrid of a democratic regime and an authoritarian regime. So according to Russia's constitution, they're a democracy, but in practice, Vladimir Putin makes lots of decisions that look very authoritarian in nature. So let's talk about some of the issues with Russian democracy that make it an illiberal democracy. First of all, there's a lack of separation of powers in government. There are virtually no checks and balances. Putin pretty much does whatever Putin wants to do, all right? Freedoms are very limited, particularly for certain groups of people, all right? So the news, okay, journalists, it's all state controlled, so they're going to control what's coming out. Freedom of speech is very controlled. So freedoms are very limited. There are few opportunities to speak out without consequence. Putin has been known for silencing his opposition and largely for using the courts to be able to do that. There have been lots of issues with electoral integrity, with corruption when it comes to voting. Putin has a lot of coercive power. He has the oligarchs who are loyal to him to help control things. He has the military to kind of help do whatever he wants to do. So Putin is essentially acting as a virtual dictator, okay? He's going to serve as president from 2000 to 2008, then have a few changes made so that he can come back again in 2012, and he is still serving as president today. Russia has an asymmetric federalism, which means that not all subregions are treated equally. Some have more autonomy than others. There are 85 regions of Russia, 22 of which contain non-Russian ethnic majorities. These are the republics, which we'll look at in a moment. After the fall of the Soviet Union, these areas have a sense of independent rule because the central authority under Yeltsin was very weak. Some have recently sought independence and separation from Russia. Putin's not so keen on this idea. So the next thing we're going to look at are types of federal subjects, and basically what that means are kind of their divisions within the country. So, in the US we call them states. We did the same thing in Nigeria. Here they are called federal subjects, and there's different kinds with different names. There's 85 of them total. So the republics that you can see on this map are areas of non-Russian ethnicity. Next are the Krais. These are territories. There are 9 of them total. These are historically the vast territories that are located along the edges of Russia, oftentimes very sparsely populated, particularly as you get more to the eastern part of the country. Next are the Oblasts. This is the most common type of federal subject. Next up are 3 federal cities: Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Sevastopol. Now that we've had a look at how the country is divided, we're going to get into the actual government structure, beginning with the executive branch. Russia has a semi-presidential system, which means that they have elements of both a presidential system and a parliamentary system. It features a dual executive system instead of a single executive like a presidential system. So the president is the head of state. The prime minister is the head of government. The prime minister is accountable to the legislature, and the cabinet is held accountable by the president and the legislature. All right, so let's look a little bit more at the executive branch setup and really get an idea of how this dual executive system works. So the head of state is the president. Okay. As of 2012, there are 6-year presidential terms in Russia. It used to be 4 years. They changed it in 2012 to benefit Putin and allow him to serve longer. The president is allowed to serve 2 consecutive terms. They are elected by popular vote of the people through a majoritarian election. So whoever gets 50% of the vote wins. There is a measure for a runoff if no one gets 50%. The head of government is the prime minister, and the prime minister is selected by the president and then approved by the Duma, which is the Russian lower house. So again, presidential elections are majoritarian in a double ballot. Essentially, if no candidate gets 50% of the vote on the first ballot, a runoff election is held with the top two candidates. This ensures that a winner has a mandate to rule. So this is an attempt to try to establish some legitimacy by ensuring that a majority of the country votes for the president. So powers of the president. The president can issue decrees. Okay, so maybe think of it a little bit like an executive order in the United States. The president can say, this is what my administration is going to do. The president can dissolve the Duma, kind of more like what it would look like in a parliamentary system. The president can call for a referendum vote, and a referendum vote would be a vote taken from the people. So the president could put some kind of issue that he feels is important to the people and try to get them to approve it. He is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He appoints to the Federation Council, which is the upper house in the legislature, as well as appointments to the federal courts, and he also conducts foreign policy. So Russia's only had 3 presidents since 1991. The first was Boris Yeltsin. Then Vladimir Putin's first 2 terms from 1999 to 2008. The Russian Constitution said that you could only serve 2 consecutive terms, so that meant that Putin had to step aside in 2008, and essentially he and his prime minister just changed positions. So Dmitry Medvedev becomes president for 4 years, Putin becomes the prime minister, and then in 2012 they switch back. Okay, because then Putin could go in and serve 2 more consecutive terms. The next presidential election is in 2024, and just a few months ago, the Russians changed the constitution that will allow Putin to serve an additional 2 6-year terms as president. So the prime minister is the head of government, and he serves more of an administrative role by helping to implement domestic policy and overseeing the bureaucracy, all the various people that work for the government. There's no vice president in Russia, so the prime minister assumes the presidency if that is needed. The current prime minister is Mikhail Mishustin, and he just started in January 2020. Obviously, there's much more to say about Putin, and we certainly will over the course of this unit. But for right now, let's move on to the legislative branch. In Russia, it is bicameral. The upper house is called the Federation Council. The lower house is called the State Duma, often just Duma. The Duma has a total of 450 seats. The members are chosen through a mixed election system. 225 seats are from single-member districts. 225 seats come from proportional representation. A party needs to get a minimum of 5% of the vote to be able to get representation through that proportional representation system. The next Duma election is next year, 2021. The Federation Council is made up of 170 members. There's 2 for each federal subject. Remember, appointments to the Federation Council are made by local governments. There's no fixed terms for the Federation Council. Local governments can decide when they want to remove someone, and the president can make recommendations. So this gives Putin a really heavy influence over this body, especially since 9 of the federal districts don't have any elections at all. They just appoint a governor from a list of candidates that Putin gives them. So it allows Putin to have a lot of influence in this process of picking this Federation Council. The Federation Council is supposed to be non-political. So, in theory, this might make for a smoother governing process. But, I'll let you decide how well you think this actually works. So let's talk about powers of the legislature. The Duma passes legislation. They have the ability to confirm the prime minister. The Federation Council approves budget legislation, treaties, judicial nominees, troop deployment. So hopefully you can see that by Putin having a major influence in who sits on the Federation Council, it also makes it much easier for him to get his agenda through. Let's talk about the court system now. They do have judicial review in theory. A lot of this is in theory. There are 19 judges total that are appointed by the president and then confirmed by the Federation Council. They serve terms of 12 years. The judges are supposed to be independent. The court is supposed to make sure all the laws and decrees conform to the Constitution. However, Putin has huge control over this court, okay? So he's appointing the people that sit on the court, and they're confirmed by the Federation Council, which he also has a great deal of control over. So it certainly doesn't serve as a check to Putin's power. And in fact, the judicial system in Russia is often used to target opposition parties and other groups that are not big fans of the president. This is just a picture of the Russian Constitutional Court, so you have an idea what it looks like. Russia uses a code law system, meaning that laws are actually, written down into a legal code versus just being based off of precedent like they are in a more common law system. Russia has an extensive prison system. There are very harsh penalties, and the sentencing is very frequent. They no longer use the death penalty, but you can always be, sent out to some awful work camp in the eastern part of Russia as well. So that's something that rulers have used as a punishment for a long time within Russia. All right, that's it for today. If you have any questions, please let me know.